Hi, welcome to the Fireplace Whisperer Studios. My name is Chris, and today we're going to talk about the Rais Rondo. I'm going to go over a full review of this unit, all the specifications, the features and benefits of this stove, because we want you to be able to make an informed decision to really know, does this stove fit your needs? So hang tight, I'll be back in just a second. So Rais has been making their stove since 1974, and the Rondo has been in production for many years. Now, it's fairly small in size. I have it on a pedestal, so it appears taller than it normally is in a customer's home. The total height is about 40.5 inches tall, 19.5 inches deep, and by 19.5 inches wide. The 6-inch exhaust does come out in the dead center of the stove. A common question I get is, what size is the baking compartment, as Rais calls this? This is considered the baking compartment. Even though there's no door, it gets pretty warm right here. So this area right here is about 16 inches wide by 6 inches tall, and the deepest portion, because it has the arch on it, the deepest depth is about 7 inches. This soapstone piece here is just sitting in place, and this comes standard with the unit. The optional soapstone top would sit right up here, and it would have a hole in the middle where the exhaust comes up, and that's an optional piece. Now, soapstone is a nice thermal mass, kind of like a battery. It's so thick and dense that it stores a lot of heat. So as the stove is heating up, the soapstone retains that heat. As the flame goes out, the heat then is released out of that soapstone. Really creates a nice even heat. Now underneath, we have where the outside air can connect. Now depending on where you're installing it, if you're pulling a permit, your building department may or may not require that outside air to be connected directly to the unit. So you check with your building authorities to see what they would require. But you can enter in through the floor of the stove, or directly behind, there's a knockout, and you can bring in the fresh air that way. One feature I love about the Rais, and most of their units have this, and that is what they call the air-cooled hollow handle. Now it's metal, so it would normally get really hot. But because it's hollow, room air actually enters in through this handle into the firebox. So this handle will always remain pretty cool to the touch. It'll be warm, but you're not going to burn yourself. One feature of the arched glass, heat exits glass on a perpendicular angle. And so because of its arch, the heat radiates all through this arched glass throughout the room better than a flat piece of glass. This stove works off of convection. And what that means is the cooler room air, which is going to settle down towards the floor in your home, it's going to enter in right here, and there's spaces right behind this outer shell that we see. There's an air space in there, and as the firebox heats up, it's going to draw that cool air as it heats up, kind of creating a draft inside, and then it exits right here back into the house. And so there's always air moving around this stove, and you don't need a fan. And Rais doesn't even make a fan for this. It was designed purely off of convection. How cool would it be to be able to turn your wood stove as it's burning and face it to a different room? So for instance, your kitchen is over there, you're prepping your dinner, the stove is pointing to the kitchen. Then later, after dinner, you're watching a movie with the family in the family room, which is over here. You can take the stove and you can rotate it to face the family room. And you can do that through the optional turntable kit that Rais has made for the Rondo. Color options for this stove are black or platinum. This stove may appear small in stature, but it actually heats like crazy. 1,080 square feet is the number that Rais has come up with as the average square footage that the Rondo will heat up. Now it depends. If your house is in Alaska or if it's on the coast in Oregon, the ratios are going to be a little different. But on average, this unit will heat nearly 1,100 square feet. It's an EPA certified stove with emissions of 4.5 grams per hour. It's a heat rated stove. This is not just a pretty decorative stove. This thing can heat most homes in the world. Now this unit has the outside air adjustment right below the door, just on this lever that moves left to right. And there's indicators actually on the metal here. They had to have used a very either plasma cutter or water jet to cut those indicators out in that thick metal. But they're not going anywhere. They're not a sticker. It's part of the metal right here. And so these indicators show kind of higher flame, medium flame, and just a small indicator kind of showing you that this is the least amount of air allowed into the firebox. And that's how you control your burn rate, is by moving this lever. Now, there's a unique system on this. They call it tertiary air, and you only need it when you first start your fire. And so right in the middle, there's this little step-looking icon, and that means you slide it to about the middle, and then you lift up on the lever, and then you continue sliding to the right, and that opens up that tertiary air, that third air is what tertiary means. And basically what's happening is they're allowing more air that's focused right at the bottom of the firebox, and that helps get that fire started faster and more vigorously and establishes that draw. Now once you have a draw established, you have a good bed of embers in there, then you're going to drop it down to the step, and that is full air. So during normal operation, this is full air, meaning you're going to get the max amount of heat, you're going to get big flames, your glass is going to be a little cleaner, and then as you start to idle it down by shifting it to the left, then your heat output's going to go down, your flames are going to go down, and that is how you adjust that. Now we're going to open this up, and we're going to start talking about wood. We're going to put wood in here, and I'm going to do the top-down burn, which is basically we're going to put larger wood down in the firebox first, and then we're going to put kindling on top of that, followed by some paper. Now before I do that, I want to talk to you about the length of wood. Rais says that 13.5 inches can fit in there. Well, 13.5 is pretty snug, and you might get your first couple pieces in there, because my widest point in this firebox is 15 inches. So you could probably get 1 or 2 pieces that are 13.5 inches, but after that, they have to be shorter. So don't fill up your woodshed with 13.5 inch wood. You're gonna pull your hair out trying to load this thing with wood. Now, you could put your wood vertically. There's a little more room in there, but you'll just have to play around with it. Just depending if you want it more horizontal or more vertical. It'll look pretty cool going vertical for sure. But I have this wood at 10.5, right around 10.5, and I can fit it almost all the way in the back, all the way to the front. So I can get a lot of 10.5 inch wood in here. So we're going to put some bigger pieces in here, and I'm going to stack them, kind of crisscross them a little bit. Now, they also talk about in a lot of their owner's manuals about establishing a draft and establishing it quickly. Oh, the sound of crumpled paper makes you think of that cold morning in the winter when it's time to light the wood stove. So in the owner's manual, it actually says that you can, I gotta find the, kind of where the baffle is up there at the ceiling, you can get a piece of paper up there. There you go. It's up there. It's ready to be fired off. And so what you would do is you would light that one first, and that one's going to send up an immense amount of heat and try to reverse the temperature in the flue. Because right now, when you're starting your stove, it's cold outside, which means the temperature inside your flue is also very cold. Now, I'm going to throw some kindling, some smaller wood on top of the larger wood, and this is that top-down burn option that I was talking about, because essentially your fire is starting at the top. It's going to get your paper lit, then it's going to go right to your kindling, which then is going to turn to your coal, which is going to drop down on the heavy or the larger wood, and then your larger wood is going to start burning. Now I'm going to open the air all the way up, lift up, go to the right, all the way to the right, make sure we got that tertiary air, and then I'm going to throw some paper on top of the kindling. Now it's always exciting for me to start a new stove for the very first time, like right after I install it in a customer's home and I get to light it off. It's exciting, and yet it's kind of sad also at the same time, because it's such a clean stove right now. And now when I start the fire, it's going to be dirty. But that's okay. I'll get over it. Okay, here it is, the maiden voyage of this Rais Rondo stove. We're going to light this thing up and see how it burns. You might not see it very well. Maybe I'll get a different shot, but right at the top third of the firebox here, you see a series of little holes, and that is your secondary air that enters into the firebox. So when this wood gets started, it's turning from a solid into a gas. As the gas rises in the firebox, it hits that air, and because of the temperature inside this firebox is high enough, those gases automatically ignite. And for certain points of the burn, you'll actually see what look like flames coming out of those holes. So that's your secondary burn. That's where you get most of your heat, and that is how it burns so clean, because it's burning more of those particulates. So the particulates actually escaping are no more than 4.5 grams per hour. All right, enough with those boring statistics. It's time to light this thing up. Remember, I'm going to light it up here first. Try to get this going, establish this draft. And by doing that, what happens when I light this, it should produce less smoke. Because now that's burning, I can hear it. It's roaring. Now this is just going to be pulled right up because I've established that first draft, and now this is just going to burn right up. And so far, I don't see any smoke coming into the room. And you just have to gauge it. The owner's manual also says, now's the time where you can partially close the door. And I just watch it, because depending on the kindling, if you have higher moisture content in that kindling, you're going to have to throw some more paper on it. So don't just think that your first paper is going to do the trick. See, it's already starting to die a little bit. I need to get some more paper on it. Come on, don't die on me. Keep burning. Because the danger with it, if it stops burning now, I'm generating smoke. Like, smoke is starting to happen. So if the flame goes out, the smoke then could come back into the house. And you really don't want that. That's usually one of the biggest complaints at our showroom, is people say, I had a wood stove, but it was always so smoky in the house. And sometimes it had to do with the actual venting. Maybe the venting was too short, or just wasn't installed properly to begin with. Now I'm going to run out of paper. Ah! All right, we'll be back in a second after this thing gets up and running, and we'll start to see it in action. As I was watching the flame, I was thinking, how big is that glass? Because there is lots of view of the flame on this. And after measuring, it's about 14 inches by 14 inches. of glass. And I think it's because it's also convex, where it just appears bigger. I can feel the heat. That's amazing. I just need a marshmallow and a stick. So in the real world, you've started it, it's been running for 10 to 15 minutes, it's now starting to produce a lot of heat. You know you have a draw established. You've taken it out of tertiary air, you now have it in full air, and now you're going to want to lower that heat output, because if you don't, pretty soon you're going to be opening doors and windows and cooking yourself out of the house. So we're just going to start sliding this air, and kind of like putting a lid on a candle, we're now starving it of air, and so now the burn rate has to slow down. So right there, huge difference where I'm all the way closed right now. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up just a little bit. So you can now kind of see some flames happening up above that top third of the fireplace. And that's the gases igniting, because we now have a fair amount of gases coming off of this wood, and it's rising up in the firebox because of the draw happening, and then it hits that air that's being introduced and it ignites those gases. Now by idling it down and starving it from air, it's actually going to burn longer, and that's how you're going to get a longer burn time. So lower heat output, longer burn time. We're basically stretching out the fuel that's in there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that about summarizes our stove review on the Rais Rondo wood stove. I've covered the specs, the dimensions of the unit, the features and benefits of it. You've seen it burn. It's a beautiful stove, and one that you might consider in your house. I'm Chris the Fireplace Whisperer. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or our Instagram account, Facebook. You'll find us if you look for us. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye.